The November wind cut through downtown Chicago like a knife, rattling the windows of Sterling and Associates' 32nd floor office. I sat in the cramped cubicle that had been my prison for the past 2 years, watching the gray clouds gather over Lake Michigan. My name is Jordan Blake, and at 28, I was supposed to be climbing the corporate ladder at one of Chicago's most prestigious advertising agencies. Instead, I was drowning. Blake. The voice of my boss, Vincent Harrington, boomed across the office. His corner office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Magnificent Mile, while I sat under flickering fluorescent lights that made everything look sickly pale. Conference room. Now. I grabbed my laptop and the presentation I'd been working on for weeks. The Meridian Tech account was our biggest potential client this quarter, a startup that had revolutionized sustainable energy storage. They were looking for a campaign to launch their consumer product line, and landing this account could change everything for Sterling and Associates. The conference room smelled like expensive coffee and Vincent's cologne. He sat at the head of the mahogany table, his silver hair perfectly styled, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Around the table sat the other senior executives, Patricia Wells from Creative, Michael Torres from Strategy, and Catherine Liu from Account Management. I took my seat at the far end, closest to the door. "All right, people," Vincent began, adjusting his Rolex. "Meridian Tech will be here in 2 hours. This is a $40 million account and I want our A-game. Patricia, let's see what Creative has prepared." Patricia stood confidently, her presentation flowing smoothly across the wall-mounted screen. Sleek graphics, bold colors, celebrity endorsements. It was polished, expensive, and completely generic. The kind of campaign that could sell anything from cars to breakfast cereal. "Excellent work," Vincent nodded approvingly. "Michael, strategy?" Michael's presentation focused on market penetration and demographic targeting. Charts and graphs filled the screen, showing projected ROI and market share growth. "Solid numbers, conservative approach, minimal risk." "Outstanding," Vincent smiled. "Catherine, account management?" Catherine outlined the timeline, budget allocation, and client relationship strategy. Professional, organized, by the book. Then all eyes turned to me. Vincent's expression shifted, his smile becoming condescending. "And Jordan, I'm sure you've prepared something as well?" I stood up, my heart pounding. For weeks, I'd researched Meridian Tech obsessively. I'd studied their founder. Elena raised an eyebrow as she sat down. "Unemployed as of when?" "As of about 3 hours ago. I quit Sterling and Associates this morning." "Because of yesterday's meeting?" I considered how to answer that. "Because of everything that led up to yesterday's meeting, and everything that would have come after it if I'd stayed." Elena nodded slowly, studying my face. "Vincent Harrington strikes me as the kind of man who doesn't handle being challenged very well." "That's an accurate assessment." She opened her portfolio and pulled out a tablet, setting it on the table between us. "Jordan, I'm going to be direct with you because I think we're both tired of corporate games. Yesterday, you presented the first marketing concept I've seen in 3 years that actually understood what Meridian Tech is trying to accomplish." The tablet screen showed a document titled, "Meridian Tech Consumer Campaign Community Partnership Model." As I scanned the first page, I realized it was an expansion of everything I'd presented yesterday, developed with the kind of resources and strategic depth that I'd never had access to at Sterling and Associates. "You've been busy," I said. "My team has been busy," Elena corrected. "I sent your presentation to our internal marketing director and our community outreach coordinator. They spent most of last night and this morning building on your concept." She swiped to the next page, showing a network diagram of potential community partnerships. Churches, community centers, neighborhood associations, local nonprofits, disaster preparedness organizations. Each node was connected to demographic data, community need assessments, and projected conversion rates. "Your instinct about community-based marketing was exactly right," Elena continued. "But look at this." She showed me a cost analysis comparing traditional advertising approaches with community partnership models. Broad market digital advertising to reach our actual target demographic would cost approximately $60 per qualified lead. Celebrity endorsements and lifestyle marketing would be even more expensive, maybe $80 to $90 per lead. I looked at the numbers, trying to process what I was seeing. "Community partnerships," Elena said, tapping the screen. "Conservative estimate puts us at $12 per qualified lead. And those leads convert to sales at nearly 3 times the rate of traditional advertising because they come through trusted community sources." She swiped to another page showing projected campaign budgets. The numbers were staggering, but not in the way I'd expected. Instead of the massive media buys and celebrity endorsement fees that Patricia would have proposed, the budget focused on grassroots engagement, community event sponsorships, and partnerships with local organizations. Elena, I said carefully, this is incredible work. But why are you showing it to me? You have an internal marketing team. You could hire any agency in the country with this kind of budget. She smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, it looked genuinely relaxed. Because agencies think like agencies. They think about campaigns and demographics and market penetration. But you think like a storyteller. You understand that we're not selling a product, we're selling a promise. And promises require trust, and trust requires relationships. She leaned forward, her expression becoming more intense. Jordan, I started Meridian Tech because I watched my father die in the dark while utility companies made excuses and government agencies pointed fingers. Everything we've built, every innovation we've developed, every market we've entered, it's all been about making sure that never happens to another family. The coffee shop around us seemed to fade into the background. Elena's voice carried the kind of passionate conviction that I'd tried to capture in my presentation but had never felt personally. But here's what I've learned in 5 years of building this company, she continued. Having the best technology doesn't matter if the people who need it most can't afford it. Having the most innovative product doesn't matter if your marketing only reaches people who already have backup power systems. Having a $40 million budget doesn't matter if you're spending it on the wrong message for the wrong audience. She pulled out a printed photograph and placed it on the table. It showed a young girl, maybe 8 years old, doing homework at a kitchen table illuminated by a warm reading lamp. Through the window behind her, I could see the darkness of a power outage stretching across the neighborhood. This is Maria Santos. Her family bought our home system 8 months ago, 3 weeks before Hurricane Nicholas hit Houston. While her neighbors were dealing with spoiled food and dead phones and darkness, Maria was able to finish her school project and help her grandmother with her evening medication routine. Elena's eyes never left the photograph. That's our customer, Jordan. That's who we're really serving. And yesterday, you were the only person in that conference room who understood that. I stared at the photograph, remembering my own presentation slides, the stories I'd researched about families whose lives had been changed by reliable backup power. What are you asking me to do? I said finally. Elena closed her tablet and leaned back in her chair. I'm offering you a job. Director of Community Engagement for Meridian Tech's Consumer Division. Your primary responsibility would be developing and implementing the community partnership strategy we've outlined here. The coffee in my cup had gone cold while we talked, but I barely noticed. Director level? Director level. With a budget of $12 million for the first year, expanding to $20 million if we hit our community penetration targets. Elena's expression was businesslike now, but I could see the excitement in her eyes. You'd be building something completely new, Jordan. Not just a marketing campaign, but a framework for how technology companies can actually serve the communities that need them most. I thought about Vincent's performance improvement plan, about carpet cleaning jingles and Yellow Pages advertisements and 90 days of systematic humiliation. Then I looked at the photograph of Maria Santos doing her homework by the light of a Meridian Tech system. What about my experience? I'm 28 years old, I've never managed a budget bigger than $50,000, I've never run a department or led a team. Experience is what got us Patricia Wells and her celebrity endorsement strategy, Elena said dryly. Experience is what got us Michael Torres and his market penetration models that completely ignored actual customer needs. I'm not looking for experience, Jordan. I'm looking for understanding. She pulled out a business card, different from the one she'd given me yesterday. This one showed my name with the title, Director of Community Engagement, and the Meridian Tech logo. The salary is $95,000, plus performance bonuses tied to community partnership success metrics. Full health benefits, 4 weeks vacation, and a professional development budget for any training or conferences you think would help you do the job better. I stared at the business card with my name on it. $95,000 was nearly double what I'd been making at Sterling and Associates. But more than the money, it was the title, the responsibility, the chance to build something meaningful instead of just supporting other people's vision. There's one more thing, Elena said. I want to be completely transparent about what this job would involve. You'd be traveling probably 30% of the time, visiting communities, building relationships with local organizations, attending disaster preparedness events and community meetings. It's not glamorous work. You'd be spending a lot of time in church basements and community center conference rooms, talking to people who've never heard of Meridian Tech and convincing them that we're different from every other corporation that's made promises and disappeared. She paused, watching my reaction. And you'd be starting from scratch. No existing team, no established processes, no proven playbook. You'd be building the entire community engagement strategy from the ground up, making it up as you go along. The enormity of what she was offering hit me all at once. Not just a job, but a chance to prove that everything I'd believed about marketing and storytelling and connecting with real people could actually work in the corporate world. When would you need an answer? I asked. Elena smiled. I was hoping you'd say yes before you finished your coffee. I looked around the coffee shop, at the exposed brick walls and reclaimed wood tables, at the people working on laptops and having quiet conversations. Through the windows, I could see Chicago's downtown streets, still gleaming from the morning's rain, full of people heading home from work or meeting friends or beginning their evening plans. Somewhere out there, families were dealing with power outages and utility failures and the constant anxiety of not knowing if the lights would stay on when they needed them most. And Elena was offering me a chance to actually do something about it. Yes, I said. Yes. I accept the position. Elena's smile was brilliant. Excellent. Can you start Monday? Monday? I laughed. I thought you might want to do background checks, reference calls, maybe a more formal interview process. Jordan, Elena said, extending her hand across the table, yesterday you stood up in a room full of senior executives and told them they were wrong about a $40 million account. Then you quit your job rather than compromise your principles. I don't need references to know what kind of person you are. I shook her hand, and this time her grip felt like a promise. Welcome to Meridian Tech, she said. Get ready to change some lives. As we left the coffee shop together, the late afternoon sun was breaking through the last of the storm clouds, casting long golden shadows across Randolph Street. The city looked different somehow, full of possibilities I hadn't noticed before. Elena, I said as we reached the corner where our paths would diverge, can I ask you something? Of course. Yesterday when you walked into that conference room, did you already know that Sterling and Associates wasn't right for the account? Elena considered the question. I knew within the first 10 minutes of Vincent's opening remarks. But I wanted to see all the presentations, to confirm that nobody in the room understood what we were actually trying to accomplish. And then I gave my presentation. And then you gave your presentation, she agreed. Which told me that I was wrong about nobody in the room understanding our mission. She handed me a folder I hadn't noticed her carrying. Your first assignment as Director of Community Engagement. I want you to spend the weekend reviewing these community profiles and partnership opportunities. Monday morning, we'll discuss your strategy for the first 90 days. I opened the folder and saw detailed analyses of communities across the Midwest and South, areas prone to severe weather, power grid failures, and infrastructure problems. Each profile included demographic data, local organization contacts, and notes about specific disaster experiences that had affected each community. This is incredible research, I said. It should be. We've been working on community engagement strategy for 2 years, but we never found the right person to implement it. Elena's expression grew serious. Jordan, I want you to understand something. This job isn't going to be easy. You'll be working with communities that have good reason not to trust corporations making promises. You'll be building relationships with people who've been disappointed by the system too many times to count. And you'll be doing it while representing a company that's trying to prove we're different. The weight of the responsibility was starting to sink in. Any advice for how to do that? Elena smiled. Remember Maria Santos doing her homework? Remember Rosa Martinez keeping her community kitchen open during the hurricane? Remember why backup power matters to real families in real situations? As long as you keep those stories at the center of everything you do, you'll figure out the rest. As I walked back toward the L station, Elena's folder under my arm and her business card with my name on it in my pocket, I felt something I hadn't experienced since college. The excitement of starting something completely new, something that mattered, something that could actually make a difference. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Jordan, this is Patricia from Sterling and Associates. Heard about your conversation with Vincent. If you ever want to discuss opportunities in the industry, feel free to reach out. Professional courtesy. BW. I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it without responding. Another text came in, this one from Elena. Forgot to mention your office is on the 14th floor, corner space with windows facing west toward the lake. Figured you deserved a view after everything you've been through. See you Monday morning. As the L train carried me home through the city I'd lived in for 6 years, I watched the neighborhood scroll past the windows and thought about communities, about stories, about the difference between selling products and solving problems. 6 months later, I was standing in Rosa's community kitchen in New Orleans, watching her show a group of local business owners the Meridian Tech system that had kept her doors open through 3 separate power outages. The room was warm with the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of genuine conversation, people sharing stories about weathering storms and taking care of their neighbors. "The thing about Jordan and his team," Rosa was saying, gesturing toward where I stood with 2 of my community coordinators, "is they didn't come here selling us anything. They came here asking what we needed." Through the kitchen windows, I could see the late afternoon sun casting golden light across the rebuilt neighborhood, solar panels glinting on rooftops, backup systems humming quietly in community centers and small businesses. The network of partnerships we'd built stretched from Houston to Miami, from Detroit to Denver, connecting communities that had learned to rely on each other when everything else failed. My phone buzzed with a message from Elena. Community engagement metrics for Q2 just came in. 847% increase in qualified leads, 312% increase in conversion rates, and 89% customer satisfaction rating. Also, 3 communities have asked us to sponsor their emergency preparedness training programs. Think you're getting the hang of this storytelling business? I smiled, looking around the room at people who'd become more than customers, who'd become partners in building something bigger than any single company or campaign. Outside, the storm clouds were gathering again, but nobody seemed worried. They had each other, they had reliable power, and they had the knowledge that when the lights went out, they wouldn't be alone in the dark. Tomorrow, I would fly to Phoenix to meet with a network of community colleges interested in incorporating backup power education into their emergency management programs. Next week, my team would launch a pilot program in rural Tennessee, working with local churches to identify families who needed reliable power for medical equipment. Next month, we'd be expanding into 3 new states, following the same model we'd perfected through months of listening, learning, and building trust one relationship at a time. But tonight, I was exactly where I belonged. In a warm kitchen full of people who understood that the most important technologies aren't about convenience or status or market dominance. They're about making sure that when everything else fails, communities can still take care of each other. The storm outside was intensifying, rain beginning to streak the windows and lightning flickering in the distance. But inside Rosa's community kitchen, powered by reliable energy and sustained by human connection, the lights stayed on. And I knew they always would. Vasquez, a former MIT professor who'd lost her father in Hurricane Maria when Puerto Rico's power grid failed. I'd analyzed their technology, their mission, their potential impact on communities affected by climate disasters. My presentation opened with a photo of a neighborhood in New Orleans, still rebuilding from hurricane damage. "Meridian Tech isn't selling batteries," I began. "They're selling hope, security, the promise that when the lights go out, families won't be left in the dark." I clicked to the next slide, showing a real family whose small business had survived a power outage using Meridian's technology. This campaign isn't about features and specifications. It's about the moment a single mother realizes she can keep her refrigerated medications cold during a blackout. It's about the elderly man who doesn't have to choose between running his oxygen concentrator and keeping his food fresh. The room was silent. I continued, showing mock-ups of community-centered advertising, testimonials from real users, partnerships with disaster relief organizations. Instead of celebrity endorsements, I proposed using actual customers, people whose lives had been changed by reliable backup power. The tagline isn't, "Power your life," I said, clicking to my final slide. It's light through the storm. Because that's what Meridian Tech really offers. Not just energy storage but peace of mind. When I finished, the silence stretched uncomfortably long. Vincent leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he began to laugh. "You're useless, Blake," he said, his laughter growing louder. "Absolutely useless. Elena Vasquez is a businesswoman, not a social worker. She wants to sell products, not save the world. This bleeding heart nonsense might work at a nonprofit, but this is advertising." Patricia smirked. "It's very idealistic, Jordan." Michael nodded in agreement. "The emotional appeal is nice, but where are the hard metrics? The market analysis?" Catherine didn't even look up from her phone. "Clients want to see professionalism, not amateur hour." Vincent stood up, still chuckling. "Jordan, I want you to take notes during the meeting. Real notes, not your creative writing exercises. Watch how professionals handle a $40 million pitch." The next hour crawled by. I sat in my cubicle, staring at my presentation on the laptop screen. Outside, the storm clouds had darkened, and the first drops of rain began streaking down the windows. I thought about Elena Vasquez, about the research I'd done into her background, her motivations, her vision for the company she'd built from nothing. Maybe Vincent was right. Maybe I was useless. At exactly 2 p.m. the elevator doors opened, and Elena Vasquez walked into our office. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with intelligent dark eyes and an understated confidence. She wore a simple navy blazer and carried a leather portfolio that looked well-used rather than expensive. Vincent greeted her like an old friend, though I knew they'd never met. "Elena. Welcome to Sterling and Associates. I'm Vincent Harrington and this is my team." He gestured around the conference room. "Patricia Wells, our creative director. Michael Torres, strategy. Catherine Liu, account management." Then his hand landed on my shoulder, heavier than necessary. "And this is Jordan Blake, one of our junior associates. Jordan will be taking notes for us today." Elena shook my hand, her grip firm. "Nice to meet you, Jordan." "The pleasure's mine, Ms. Vasquez," I replied, then immediately worried I'd sounded too formal. Vincent launched into his opening remarks, talking about Sterling and Associates' impressive client list, their award-winning campaigns, their commitment to excellence. Elena listened politely, occasionally nodding, but I noticed her eyes wandering around the room, taking in the expensive artwork, the panoramic view, the obvious displays of wealth. "Now," Vincent said, "let's show you why Sterling and Associates is the right choice for Meridian Tech's consumer launch." Patricia went first, just as she had in our rehearsal. The sleek graphics looked even more impressive on the conference room's premium display system. Celebrity endorsements, lifestyle imagery, aspirational messaging. "Power your life," in bold, modern typography. Elena asked a few polite questions about timeline and deliverables, but her enthusiasm seemed muted. Michael's strategic analysis was thorough and professional. Market segments, competitive landscapes, growth projections. Elena nodded along, taking notes in her portfolio. Catherine's account management presentation was flawless, outlining communication protocols, reporting structures, and budget oversight. When the formal presentations ended, Vincent leaned forward with his most charming smile. "So, Elena, what do you think? Ready to power up Meridian Tech's consumer success?" Elena was quiet for a moment, tapping her pen against her portfolio. "The work is very professional," she said carefully. "Very polished. But I have to ask," she looked around the room, "what do you see when you look at Meridian Tech?" Vincent didn't hesitate. "I see opportunity. A revolutionary product entering a massive market. The potential for significant brand growth and market penetration." "Market penetration," Elena repeated, something shifting in her expression. "And what problem do you think we're solving?" Patricia jumped in. "Energy independence. Convenience. Modern lifestyle enhancement." Elena's pen stopped tapping. "I started Meridian Tech after my father died during Hurricane Maria. Puerto Rico's power grid failed and he couldn't power his dialysis machine. He died in the dark, surrounded by broken promises from utility companies and government agencies who said help was coming." The room went completely silent. Vincent's confident smile faltered. "Meridian Tech isn't about lifestyle enhancement," Elena continued, her voice steady but carrying an edge. "It's about making sure no one else has to die because the lights went out. It's about giving communities the power to survive when everything else fails." She stood up, closing her portfolio. "Your presentations are beautiful, Mr. Harrington. Very expensive looking. But they don't understand what we're actually doing." Vincent scrambled to recover. "Elena, of course we understand the humanitarian aspect, but from a marketing perspective." "From a marketing perspective," Elena interrupted, "you're trying to sell luxury items to people who already have everything. That's not my customer base. My customers are families who've lived through blackouts, small business owners who can't afford to lose a day's revenue, communities that have been failed by the system too many times to count." She turned toward the door, then paused. "Actually, before I go, I'd like to hear from Jordan." Every head in the room turned toward me. Vincent's face had gone pale. "Elena, Jordan is just here to observe." "Jordan," Elena said, ignoring Vincent completely. "What do you think Meridian Tech is really about?" My mouth went dry. I could feel Vincent's glare burning into the side of my head. Patricia's smirk had turned into something sharper. Michael and Catherine looked like they were watching a car accident in slow motion. But Elena was looking at me expectantly, and something in her eyes reminded me of the research I'd done, the stories I'd read, the presentation I'd spent weeks crafting. "I think," I said, my voice cracking slightly, "I think you're not selling batteries at all." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Go on." I took a breath. You're selling the promise that when everything else fails, when the storm hits and the grid goes down and the authorities can't help, people won't be helpless. You're selling the ability to take care of your family, to keep your business running, to be the light in your community when everything goes dark. The silence in the room was deafening. Elena said slowly, that's exactly right. Vincent tried to interject. Jordan hasn't prepared any formal materials. Actually, I said, surprising myself with my boldness, I have. The conference room felt like it had shrunk by half. Vincent's face had shifted through several shades of red, finally settling on a dangerous purple that made his temple veins visible. Patricia's perfectly manicured fingers drummed impatiently against the mahogany table, while Michael and Catherine exchanged glances that clearly said, career suicide in progress. But Elena Vasquez leaned forward, her dark eyes focused entirely on me. You have a presentation? My laptop felt impossibly heavy as I opened it. The presentation I'd worked on for countless late nights, the one Vincent had dismissed as bleeding heart nonsense, filled the screen. My hands trembled slightly as I connected to the room's display system. Jordan, Vincent's voice carried a warning that everyone in the room could hear. I don't think. Actually, Elena said, not taking her eyes off me, I'd very much like to see what Jordan has prepared. Please continue. The first image appeared on the screen, that neighborhood in New Orleans, houses still bearing the scars of hurricane damage, but with one small business glowing warmly in the evening light. A hand-painted sign read Rosa's Community Kitchen, open during storms. This is Rosa Martinez, I began, my voice growing steadier as I found my rhythm. She runs a community kitchen in the lower 9th Ward. When Hurricane Ida knocked out power for 6 days, Rosa's was the only place in a 3-block radius that could still serve hot meals. Not because she had a generator, but because she had invested in a Meridian Tech home system 6 months earlier. Elena sat up straighter. She knew this story, I realized. She'd probably met Rosa personally. I clicked to the next slide. A photo of Rosa surrounded by neighbors, her kitchen warm and bright while the rest of the street disappeared into darkness. Rosa didn't buy your product because she wanted energy independence. She bought it because she remembered being a kid during Katrina, remembered what it felt like to be hungry and scared and completely forgotten by the outside world. The room was dead silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the rain now pelting against the windows. I could feel Vincent's anger radiating from the head of the table, but I couldn't stop now. Your target demographic isn't wealthy homeowners looking for the latest tech gadget, I continued, showing demographic breakdowns I'd compiled from community disaster preparedness surveys. It's people who've lived through failure. Single mothers who've had to throw away a week's worth of groceries because the power went out. Elderly people who've been evacuated from their homes because they couldn't power their medical equipment. Small business owners who've watched their life's work spoil in a freezer that went dark. Patricia couldn't contain herself any longer. This is ridiculous. You're talking about a charity campaign, not a consumer product launch. But Elena held up her hand, never taking her eyes off my presentation. Keep going, Jordan. I clicked to my campaign mock-ups. Instead of sleek lifestyle photography, I showed real families in real situations. A grandfather teaching his grandson to check the battery levels on their Meridian system, the way other families might check smoke detectors. A woman running her home office during a brownout, taking a video call while her neighbors dealt with darkness. A community center that had become an unofficial emergency shelter, powered entirely by renewable energy storage. The tagline isn't "Power Your Life," I said, reaching my final slides. It's "Light Through the Storm." Because that's what Meridian Tech really offers. Not convenience but resilience. Not luxury but survival with dignity. My last slide showed a simple image. A child doing homework at a kitchen table, the warm glow of a reading lamp contrasting with the storm raging outside the window. At the bottom, in simple, clean typography, Meridian Tech Light Through the Storm. When I finished, the only sound was the rain against the windows and the distant hum of Chicago traffic 32 floors below. Elena stared at the screen for a long moment, then slowly turned to look at Vincent. $40 million, she said quietly. That's what this account is worth to you, Mr. Harrington? Vincent struggled to regain his composure. Elena, of course we value the partnership, but... No, Elena said, standing up. You value the commission. There's a difference. She walked to the windows, looking out at the storm clouds gathering over Lake Michigan. When I started Meridian Tech, I had 3 options for my first big marketing push. I could hire one of the big New York agencies that wanted to make us the next Tesla. I could work with a Silicon Valley firm that promised to make us go viral. Or I could find people who actually understood what we're trying to accomplish. She turned back to face the room. Mr. Harrington, your team has presented me with exactly what I expected from Sterling and Associates. Professional, polished, and completely disconnected from reality. You want to sell luxury items to people who collect luxury items. You want to make Meridian Tech just another status symbol for people who already have everything. Vincent tried one more time to salvage the situation. Elena, I think there might be some miscommunication here. We can certainly adjust our approach. There's no miscommunication, Elena said firmly. Jordan understands my company better after what I assume was independent research than your entire senior team understands after weeks of preparation. That's not a small problem, Mr. Harrington. That's a fundamental disconnect. Patricia's voice carried barely controlled frustration. Ms. Vasquez, with respect, Jordan is a junior associate. The strategic oversight, the account management, the creative direction, those require senior-level expertise. Elena smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Let me tell you about expertise, Ms. Wells. I have a PhD in electrical engineering from MIT. I've published 12 papers on energy storage systems. I've advised 3 different federal agencies on grid resilience. And in the past 5 years, I've built Meridian Tech from a one-woman startup into a company valued at $400 million. The room had gone cold despite the efficient heating system. But none of that expertise matters, Elena continued, compared to understanding why Rosa Martinez saved for 8 months to buy our home system. Why the Johnson family in Houston has our logo tattooed on their emergency preparedness checklist. Why communities that have been failed by every other institution still trust us to keep their lights on. She gathered her portfolio and moved toward the door. Jordan gets it. The rest of you are trying to solve the wrong problem. Vincent stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. Elena, surely we can discuss this. Sterling and Associates has the resources, the connections, the industry relationships. To do what? Elena asked. To turn my father's death into a lifestyle brand? To make sure that the people who actually need reliable power can't afford the marketing budget you'd require to reach people who don't. The silence stretched until it became painful. Outside, the storm was intensifying, rain now driving horizontally across the windows. The city lights below had taken on a hazy, dreamlike quality through the water streaming down the glass. Finally, Elena spoke again, but this time she was looking directly at me. Jordan, can I ask you something? Of course, I managed to say. If you were running this campaign, how would you measure success? The question caught me off guard. Patricia's campaigns were measured in brand awareness and market share. Michael's strategies focused on revenue growth and customer acquisition costs. Catherine's account management tracked client satisfaction and retention rates. I said slowly, I think success would be measured in stories. How many families didn't lose power during the next hurricane? How many small businesses stayed open when their competitors couldn't? How many communities became more resilient instead of more dependent? Elena nodded. And how would you reach those customers? The ones who actually need what we're selling. I thought about Rosa's community kitchen, about the networks of trust that kept neighborhoods together during disasters. Community partnerships. Local organizations that people already trust. Disaster preparedness workshops. Maybe partnerships with community colleges, churches, neighborhood associations. Places where people go when they need real help, not when they want to buy something impressive. That's expensive, Michael interjected. Community outreach doesn't scale like digital advertising or celebrity endorsements. It's not expensive, I said, surprising myself with my certainty. It's efficient. Every customer you reach through community partnerships is someone who actually needs your product. The conversion rate would be incredible compared to broad market advertising. Elena was smiling now, and this time it was genuine. Jordan, would you be interested in grabbing coffee? I'd like to discuss this further. Vincent's face had progressed beyond purple into something approaching burgundy. Elena, Jordan works for Sterling and Associates. Any discussions about the Meridian Tech account need to go through proper channels. Actually, Elena said, her voice taking on a steely quality, Jordan works for you, Mr. Harrington. But I work for my customers, my investors, and the memory of my father. And right now, only one person in this room seems to understand what that means. She handed me her business card, a simple white rectangle with clean typography and the Meridian Tech logo. Jordan, my calendar is pretty flexible tomorrow afternoon. Would you be available to continue this conversation? I looked down at the card, then up at Elena's expectant face, then around the room at my colleagues. Vincent looked like he was having difficulty breathing. Patricia's smirk had disappeared entirely. Michael was frantically taking notes, probably trying to figure out how to salvage something from this disaster. Catherine had gone back to her phone, already mentally moving on to the next crisis. "I'd like that very much," I said. Elena shook my hand again, her grip warm and firm. "Excellent. I'll have my assistant send you the details." She turned to Vincent one last time. "Mr. Harrington, thank you for your time today. Your team's work was very professional. But professional isn't what I need right now." She walked to the door, then paused. "Jordan, one last question. What made you think to research my personal story? Most agencies just focus on the technology and market opportunity. I felt everyone's eyes on me again. Because technology without purpose is just expensive toys. I wanted to understand why Meridian Tech exists, not just what it does." Elena's smile was brilliant. "That's the difference between marketing and storytelling. See you tomorrow, Jordan." And then she was gone, leaving behind only the scent of her subtle perfume and the sound of rain against the windows. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Vincent's face cycling through shades of rage, or Patricia's cold smirk, or the way Catherine had dismissed me without even looking up from her phone. The rain continued through the night, a steady drumbeat against my apartment windows that matched the anxious rhythm of my thoughts. My studio apartment in Lincoln Park wasn't much to look at, especially compared to the luxury I'd witnessed in Sterling and Associates' executive offices. IKEA furniture, a kitchenette that barely deserved the name, and a Murphy bed that protested every time I tried to fold it up. But it was mine, paid for with my own work, even if that work had apparently just self-destructed in spectacular fashion. By 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep and made coffee with the cheap drip machine that had been my graduation gift to myself 2 years ago. The morning news was full of storm warnings and power outage alerts across the Midwest. Perfect weather for thinking about backup power systems and the families who might need them. I dressed carefully for work, choosing my best suit and spending extra time on details that usually didn't matter. If today was going to be my last day at Sterling and Associates, I wanted to look professional when they fired me. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt like ascending to my own execution. The office was unusually quiet for 7:30 a.m., but I could see lights on in Vincent's corner office and hear the murmur of what sounded like an angry phone conversation. I settled into my cubicle and tried to focus on my email, but concentration was impossible. Elena's business card sat on my desk like a small white beacon, her direct phone number written in elegant script below the Meridian Tech logo. At 8:15, Vincent's assistant, Ms. Rodriguez, appeared at my cubicle with an expression that mixed sympathy with professional detachment. "Jordan, Mr. Harrington would like to see you in his office. Please bring all materials related to the Meridian Tech account." The walk across the office floor felt endless. Every conversation stopped as I passed, every pair of eyes followed my movement toward Vincent's corner office. The gossip mill at Sterling and Associates was efficient and merciless, and by now everyone would know about yesterday's disaster. Vincent's office was a monument to corporate success. Awards covered one wall, photographs with celebrities and politicians covered another. His desk was positioned to take advantage of the spectacular view over Lake Michigan, but this morning the lake was gray and choppy, reflecting the stormy sky. He didn't look up when I knocked. "Come in, Jordan. Close the door behind you." I sat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk, my folder of Meridian Tech materials balanced on my knees. Vincent continued typing for another full minute, making me wait in the uncomfortable silence. Finally he looked up, his expression cold and calculating. $40 million, Jordan. That's what you cost Sterling and Associates yesterday afternoon. Mr. Harrington, I'm not finished. His voice cut through my attempt to speak. $40 million in revenue, plus the potential for additional accounts from Meridian Tech's parent company and their business partners. Conservative estimate puts your little performance at a $60 million mistake. He stood up and walked to the windows, his back to me. In 23 years of running this agency, I have never had a junior associate sabotage a client meeting. Never had someone so thoroughly undermine their colleagues and their company. The city spread out below us, Chicago's downtown bustling with morning commuters who had no idea that my career was disintegrating 32 floors above them. "You want to know what Elena Vasquez told me when I called her this morning?" Vincent asked, still facing the window. "She said Sterling and Associates wasn't the right fit for Meridian Tech's vision. She said our senior team demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of their brand identity and target market." He turned around, his eyes cold. "But she did say she was impressed with one member of our team. Can you guess who?" I didn't answer. The question was obviously rhetorical. She asked if you were available for freelance consulting work. Said she'd be happy to provide a reference for your creativity and market insight. Vincent's smile was razor sharp. Generous of her, don't you think? Trying to help you find new employment after you've made yourself unemployable here. My mouth felt dry. Am I being fired? Oh, Jordan. Vincent laughed, but there was no humor in it. Firing you would be too easy. Too clean. Do you know what happens to junior associates who embarrass senior management in front of major clients? He walked back to his desk and pulled out a file folder. Your performance reviews for the past 18 months. Consistently rated as meeting expectations or needs improvement. Your project completion rates, your client feedback scores, your collaboration ratings with colleagues. He spread the papers across his desk like playing cards. Fascinating pattern here. It seems you've been struggling with teamwork, strategic thinking, and professional judgment for quite some time. Patricia mentioned that you often seem distracted during creative sessions. Michael noted that your strategic contributions lacked senior-level oversight. Catherine observed that you had difficulty following established account management protocols. I stared at the documents, recognizing my own work but seeing it filtered through a lens of deliberate negativity. Every project I'd completed adequately was framed as barely meeting minimum standards. Every creative idea I'd contributed was described as requiring significant senior input to become viable. I started then stopped. What was the point of arguing? This is what happens when you forget your place in the hierarchy, Jordan. You're not a senior strategist. You're not a creative director. You're certainly not an account manager. You're a junior associate whose job is to support the people who actually know how to run million-dollar campaigns. Vincent sat back down, his expression almost sympathetic. But I'm not unreasonable. Everyone makes mistakes, especially young people who haven't learned to control their ambitions. So here's what's going to happen. He pulled out a new document and slid it across the desk. Performance Improvement Plan. 90 days of additional oversight, mandatory training sessions on team collaboration and professional development, and reassignment to accounts more appropriate for your experience level. I looked down at the document. 90 days of probation, essentially. 90 days of being watched, criticized, and systematically undermined by people who now saw me as a threat to their authority. What kind of accounts? I asked. Vincent's smile widened. Well, Patricia thought you might benefit from working on some of our smaller retail clients. There's a chain of dry cleaners that needs help with their Yellow Pages advertising. A carpet cleaning service that wants to update their radio jingle. Very hands-on, practical experience. The insult was deliberate and comprehensive. From a potential $40 million tech account to carpet cleaning jingles. From presenting to innovative entrepreneurs to writing copy for Yellow Pages ads that nobody under 50 would ever see. And if I refuse? Then you'll be terminated for cause. Insubordination, failure to collaborate effectively with team members, and inability to represent Sterling and Associates' values in client interactions. Vincent tapped the performance review documents. With this documentation in your file, I doubt you'd find work at any reputable agency in Chicago. Maybe not anywhere. The rain had started again, droplets streaming down the floor-to-ceiling windows like tears. Somewhere out in the city, Elena Vasquez was probably in her own office, working on plans to bring reliable power to communities that needed it. And I was sitting in a corporate tower, being systematically destroyed by a man who saw my moment of genuine passion as a personal attack. I need to think about it, I said finally. Of course you do. Vincent's voice was almost gentle now, the tone of someone offering mercy to a defeated opponent. Take your time, Jordan. But remember, this is the only offer you're going to get. Sign the performance improvement plan, and you can rebuild your career here. Eventually, with enough work and proper attitude adjustment, you might even make it back to senior-level projects. I stood up, the folder of Meridian Tech materials still in my hands. Oh, and Jordan? Vincent called as I reached the door. I'll need all of your research on Meridian Tech client materials, strategic notes, creative concepts. Everything. That work was done on company time with company resources. I turned back to face him. Including the presentation I gave yesterday? Especially the presentation you gave yesterday. That's Sterling and Associates intellectual property, even if it was developed without proper oversight. His expression was triumphant. I wouldn't want you to be tempted to use our work inappropriately in any future consulting opportunities. The walk back to my cubicle felt like a funeral march. Everyone was studiously avoiding eye contact now, suddenly very busy with their own projects. I sat down and stared at Elena's business card, still sitting on my desk like a promise of something better. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Jordan, this is Elena Vasquez. Hope you're free for coffee this afternoon. I have a proposition that might interest you. I looked around the office at the expensive furniture and the view of Lake Michigan and the comfortable prison I'd built for myself over the past 2 years. Then I looked at the performance improvement plan Vincent had given me, with its carefully crafted language of humiliation and control. Finally, I picked up Elena's business card and typed a response. Ms. Vasquez, I'd love to discuss your proposition. Where and when? Jordan. The reply came back almost immediately. Intelligentsia Coffee on Randolph, 2 p.m. And Jordan? Call me Elena. I have a feeling we're going to be working together very closely. I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the send button for my reply. Outside, the storm was intensifying again, lightning flickering through the gray clouds over the lake. But for the first time in months I felt like I could see a light through the darkness. I typed back, see you at 2 p.m. Elena? I'll be the one with questions about community partnerships and disaster resilience. Her response was immediate, perfect. I'll be the one with answers about $40 million budgets and creative independence. At exactly 11:30, I gathered everything from my desk, including all my research on Meridian Tech, and walked back to Vincent's office. Ms. Rodriguez looked surprised to see me again so soon. I'd like to speak with Mr. Harrington, I said. Vincent looked up from his computer with barely concealed irritation. Jordan, I told you to take your time with the decision. I've made my decision, I said, placing the performance improvement plan on his desk. Inside. I quit. For a moment, Vincent's carefully controlled expression cracked, showing something that might have been shock. Quit. Jordan, I don't think you understand the situation. If you leave now without completing the performance improvement process, you'll be terminated for cause. Your reputation in this industry will be what I make it, I interrupted. Based on my own work, my own relationships, and my own understanding of what clients actually need. I placed my folder of Meridian Tech materials on his desk. Here's everything I developed on company time with company resources. But Vincent? The presentation I gave yesterday wasn't based on Sterling and Associates research. It was based on 3 weeks of my own time, my own investigation, and my own understanding of what Elena Vasquez is trying to accomplish. Vincent's face was cycling back toward purple. You can't. I can, I said. And I am. Thank you for the opportunity to work at Sterling and Associates. I learned a lot about what kind of professional I don't want to become. I turned and walked toward the door, my heart hammering so hard I was sure everyone in the office could hear it. Jordan. Vincent's voice followed me across the office. You'll never work in advertising again. Not in Chicago, not anywhere. I paused at the elevator, turning back to look at him one last time. He was standing in the doorway of his office, his expensive suit and perfect hair and corner office view all suddenly looking smaller somehow. You're probably right, I said, pressing the elevator button. I probably won't work in advertising again. I think I'm going to work in storytelling instead. The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside. As they closed, I caught one last glimpse of the Sterling and Associates office, with its expensive furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows and view of Lake Michigan that suddenly seemed less impressive than it had that morning. But as the elevator descended toward the lobby, carrying me away from the only job I'd known since college, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. Outside, the storm was still raging, but I had Elena's business card in my pocket and a 2 p.m. appointment that might change everything. For the first time in 2 years, I was excited about what came next. Intelligentsia Coffee on Randolph Street was exactly the kind of place I'd expected Elena to choose. Understated, authentic, focused on quality over appearance. The exposed brick walls and reclaimed wood tables felt like the anti-Sterling and Associates, a place where substance mattered more than surface. I arrived 15 minutes early, nervous energy making it impossible to sit still anywhere else. The afternoon storm had passed, leaving Chicago's downtown streets washed clean and gleaming in the late November sunlight that filtered through breaking clouds. I ordered a black coffee and found a table near the windows, watching people hurry past on the sidewalk outside. Elena arrived exactly on time, carrying the same well-used leather portfolio I remembered from yesterday's meeting. She traded her navy blazer for a green sweater that made her dark eyes look almost luminous, and she moved through the coffee shop with the quiet confidence of someone comfortable in her own skin. Jordan, she said, extending her hand with that same firm grip. Thank you for making time on such short notice. Thank you for wanting to meet, I replied, still processing the surreal nature of the situation. 24 hours ago, I'd been a junior associate dreading another day in my cubicle. Now I was having coffee with a CEO who seemed to understand my work better than my own boss had. Elena ordered a courte-du and settled into the chair across from me, her portfolio resting on the small round table between us. For a moment, we sat in comfortable silence, watching the post-storm activity on the street outside. "So," she said finally, "I assume this morning didn't go well at Sterling and Associates." I nearly choked on my coffee. "That obvious? You're here at 2 p.m. on a Thursday, dressed in your best suit, with the slightly shell-shocked expression of someone who's just made a major life decision." Elena's smile was knowing but kind. "Plus, Vincent Harrington called me this morning to clarify some things about yesterday's meeting." "What kind of clarifications?" "Oh, the usual corporate damage control. He wanted me to know that you were a junior associate who had overstepped your authority, that your presentation wasn't officially sanctioned by the agency, and that Sterling and Associates remained committed to delivering the professional, strategic approach that major brands require." Elena took a sip of her courte-du, her expression neutral. "He also mentioned that you were being placed on a performance improvement plan to address your collaboration issues." Heat rose in my cheeks. Even after I'd quit, Vincent was still trying to control the narrative, still trying to diminish what had happened in that conference room. "I quit," I said simply. "About 2 hours ago." Elena nodded, unsurprised. "Good. Vincent Harrington is exactly the kind of person I started Meridian Tech to prove wrong." "What do you mean?" She leaned forward, her voice taking on an intensity that reminded me of her presentation disruption yesterday. "People like Vincent see everything through the lens of what's profitable for them personally. They look at my company and see market share, revenue potential, commission structures. They don't see Rosa Martinez keeping her community fed during a hurricane. They don't see the Johnson family in Houston who can power their son's nebulizer during blackouts." Elena opened her portfolio and pulled out a tablet, sliding it across the table to me. The screen showed a map of the United States dotted with hundreds of small pins in different colors. "These are our current customers," she said. "Not the customers Vincent wants us to have, but the ones we actually serve. Every pin represents a family or small business that chose our technology not because it was trendy, but because they needed it to survive." I studied the map, noticing patterns in the pin distribution. Heavy concentrations in areas prone to hurricanes, wildfires, and severe weather events. Clusters around communities that had experienced major infrastructure failures in recent years. "The red pins are residential customers," Elena continued. "Single families, usually in areas where power reliability is a real concern. Yellow pins are small businesses, green pins are community organizations like churches and community centers. Blue pins are our newest category, individual users in apartment complexes or rental situations who need portable backup power." "This is incredible," I said, zooming in on a cluster of pins in rural Texas. "How many customers total?" "About 12,000 active users right now, with installations growing by roughly 800 per month." Elena's expression was proud but thoughtful. "Not massive numbers by corporate standards, but each one represents a family that won't have to choose between keeping their medications cold and keeping their phones charged during the next blackout." I scrolled through different regions on the map, seeing the stories behind the data points. Each pin represented exactly the kind of customer I'd tried to describe in my presentation, the people Sterling and Associates had dismissed as too small or too scattered to target effectively. "This is why Vincent's approach wouldn't have worked," I said, the realization crystallizing as I spoke. "You're not selling to a demographic, you're serving communities." "Exactly." Elena retrieved her tablet and pulled out a folder of printed materials. "Which brings me to why I wanted to meet with you today. I've been looking for someone who understands that distinction, and yesterday you proved that you get it in a way most marketing professionals never will." She spread several documents across the table between us. Market research reports, customer survey data, community partnership proposals, and what looked like a comprehensive marketing strategy outline. "Meridian Tech is at a crossroads," Elena said. "We've proven our technology works, we've built a loyal customer base, and we've established sustainable manufacturing and supply chains. But we're still operating mostly through word of mouth and direct community engagement. If we want to reach the families who need our technology but don't know we exist yet, we need to scale our outreach." I picked up one of the survey reports, scanning the customer feedback data. The responses were overwhelmingly positive, but they revealed something interesting. Most customers had heard about Meridian Tech through community networks, local disaster preparedness workshops, or recommendations from people who'd already experienced power outages. Your marketing challenge isn't convincing people they need backup power, I said, thinking through the implications. It's reaching the people who already know they need it but don't know you exist. Precisely. Elena's smile was brilliant. And that requires a completely different approach than what agencies like Sterling and Associates typically offer. We don't need celebrity endorsements or aspirational lifestyle marketing. We need trusted community partnerships and authentic storytelling. She pulled out another document, this one labeled Community Partnership Pilot Program. It outlined relationships with organizations like the American Red Cross, local emergency management agencies, community colleges offering disaster preparedness courses, and even partnerships with insurance companies that wanted to help customers reduce their vulnerability to weather-related claims. This is the strategy I've been developing for the past 6 months, Elena said. But I need someone who can help execute it, someone who understands both the marketing mechanics and the deeper purpose behind what we're doing. The implications of what she was saying began to sink in. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership, Elena said, her voice steady and serious. Meridian Tech needs a director of community engagement, someone who can build and manage these local relationships, develop content that resonates with our actual customers, and help scale our impact without losing the authentic connections that make our work meaningful. She pulled out a final document, a detailed job description that looked nothing like any marketing position I'd ever seen. Community outreach, partnership development, customer story collection, local event coordination, disaster preparedness education. It was part marketing, part social work, part community organizing. The salary is competitive with senior marketing positions at traditional agencies, Elena continued, but more importantly, you'd have complete creative control over how we tell our story. No committees, no approval processes, no senior executives who think they know better than the customers we're trying to serve. I stared at the job description, my mind racing through possibilities I'd never imagined. This wasn't advertising in any traditional sense, it was something entirely different, something that felt more like advocacy than marketing. There's one more thing, Elena said, her expression becoming more serious. This position would be based here in Chicago, but it would require significant travel. Community meetings in hurricane-prone areas, disaster preparedness workshops in wildfire regions, partnership events in areas with unreliable power infrastructure. You'd be on the road at least 1 week per month, sometimes more. Travel to meet the customers directly? Travel to meet the communities we serve, Elena corrected. To understand their needs, hear their stories, and build relationships that advertising agencies could never create from a conference room 30 floors above the city. I thought about my sterile cubicle at Sterling and Associates, about Vincent's corner office with its spectacular view of problems he'd never have to solve personally. Then I imagined sitting in community centers in New Orleans, talking with small business owners in rural Texas, learning from families who'd lived through disasters that most marketing executives only read about in demographic reports. When would you need an answer? I asked. Elena checked her watch. How about now? Now? Jordan, yesterday you showed me that you understand my company better than people who've been in this industry for decades. This morning, you quit a secure job rather than compromise your principles. This afternoon, you're sitting here asking about community partnerships and authentic storytelling. Elena leaned back in her chair, her expression confident. I don't need to check your references or review your portfolio. I need someone who gets it, and you clearly do. Outside, the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across Randolph Street. The storm had passed completely, leaving the air clean and bright. Somewhere in the city, Vincent was probably still angry about losing the Meridian Tech account. Patricia was probably already planning how to spin the story to protect her own reputation. Michael and Catherine were probably relieved they'd never have to work with me again. But sitting in this coffee shop, looking at Elena's community partnership plans and customer success stories, I felt something I'd never experienced at Sterling and Associates. The possibility of work that mattered. Yes, I said. Yes, I'll take the job. Elena's smile lit up the entire coffee shop. Excellent. Welcome to Meridian Tech, Jordan. I think this is going to be the beginning of something extraordinary. She pulled out her phone and started typing rapidly. I'm sending you the formal offer letter and partnership documentation right now. Also, I hope you don't have plans for next week, because there's a disaster preparedness expo in Miami that would be perfect for you to observe before you officially start. My phone buzzed with incoming emails containing more documents than I'd seen in most months at Sterling and Associates. But these weren't performance reviews or improvement plans, they were maps and customer stories and community partnership proposals that represented real families and real needs. Elena, I said, can I ask you something? Of course. Yesterday when you came to Sterling and Associates, did you know how it was going to go? Elena was quiet for a moment, considering the question. I knew Vincent's type. I've dealt with enough agencies like Sterling and Associates to predict their approach. But I didn't know about you until you started talking about Rosa Martinez and the families who needed our technology. She gathered her materials and stood up, extending her hand one final time. That's when I knew I'd found what I was really looking for, someone who saw the same thing I saw when I started this company. Which was? Elena's smile was warm and certain. Light through the storm, Jordan. Always light through the storm. As she walked away, her leather portfolio slung over her shoulder, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, reading through the job offer and partnership documents. Outside, Chicago's downtown was transitioning from afternoon to evening, office workers heading home, traffic building toward the evening rush. But for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't dreading tomorrow. Instead, I was excited about the communities I'd meet, the stories I'd hear, and the families whose lives might be a little brighter because of work that actually mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Oh, and Jordan? Thank you for showing me that there are still people in this industry who understand the difference between marketing and storytelling. See you Monday at 9 a.m. We have a lot of light to spread. I walked out of the coffee shop into the clear Chicago evening, my resignation letter to Sterling and Associates already a memory, my future with Meridian Tech stretching ahead like a road toward communities I'd never imagined and stories I was just beginning to learn how to tell. Behind me, the city lights were beginning to flicker on as darkness approached. But ahead of me, somewhere in neighborhoods and small towns across the country, families were checking their Meridian Tech systems, preparing to keep their own lights burning no matter what storms might come. And for the first time in my career, I was going to help tell their stories.